We're here today with Dr. Larry Crabb, best-selling author and conference speaker, psychologist. But we're also joined by a close friend of mine, Duncan Sprague. I've known Duncan for years, and Duncan had an opportunity 20-some years ago to study under Larry, got his master's degree, and so we thought it would be a good idea to bring Duncan in to have some conversations with him, because he's been such a integral part of what we're going to be doing here, and we're just glad to have you here, Dunk. Thanks for joining us, man.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
I'm glad as well, because he's a buddy of mine as well. And something I've thought about Dunk for a long time is that he's a rare combination of somebody who thinks very deeply, but is very honest about all that's going on in his soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that it's rather unusual for that combination to exist in one person, because those folks that are really, really intelligent, as you are, and are well read, and you think very deeply, I think a lot of academics, people with academic ability, hide behind it. When I taught at a seminary, it felt to me, and this will sound a little bit critical, I suppose it is, that some of the professors there, who were very, very bright, very well trained, and very academic, they wouldn't deal with their lives. And it's easy to hide behind your knowledge. Knowledge can puff up as opposed to release. But you're a good thinker, but you also are pretty honest about the mess that you are. So we could have some fellowship together, friend.
There's a lot of fodder for the fire.
And then you put it together. You know, all these deep thoughts, what do they have to do with life?
Yeah.
And that's what I think the book Finding God is about. Because I wanted to find God, and I wrote the book in response to my brother's death. One brother who's been with the Lord now since 1991, and we're talking about now in the middle of the 2016 realm. And one of the key phrases in that book that got me going when Bill died, I remember saying something that we've thought about together quite a bit in many of my books. But God, I know you're good, but what are you good for? I trust you, and I said something else when Bill died. There was a plane crash. He was flying standby. He was a psychologist as well, and he was teaching in the East Coast somewhere, and he came back to living in Colorado Springs. Then he caught a flight from Denver to Colorado Springs. There were 24 passengers, and they had room for 3 more, and Bill was one of the 3. And the plane crashed, and all 24, it might have been 21, I'm forgetting, but 20-some passengers and 3 crew members all died in a plane crash. It was a horrible thing. And after his death, a couple of memorial services that I spoke at, it was about a month after Bill's death, and I couldn't sleep. And I remember saying to Rachel at 2 a.m, just wide awake, I said, honey, there are tears inside of me I have not yet shed. There was a mourning process that I just wasn't able to go into to any kind of a depth. So I got out of bed at 2 a.m, thereabouts, went to my study, grabbed my Bible, and I grabbed it looking for answers, looking for, do something with me, God, do a thing with my soul, what's going on? And I literally threw the Bible across the room in anger. I was so angry at God. You could have supported that plane from crashing, and you allowed it to crash, and you're almighty, and I don't see what you're doing that's any good in my life right now. You've broken my parents' hearts, and you've robbed me of a brother, and you could have stopped it all, and you didn't. And I got so angry at the Bible and the God who wrote the Bible. And after I did that, I realized throwing the Bible across the room isn't the best idea, And I literally fell to the ground. I don't usually fall to the ground, but I fell on the floor and just wept. And what I remember saying, and this led to the book, God, I don't know you well enough. I don't know you well enough to trust you. I don't know you well enough. Let me find you. Let me know who you are. So in the middle of life's difficulties, in the middle of death, in the middle of plane crashes, in the middle of illness, in the middle of all the problems that life brings into our life, how can I trust you? How can I call you good? I don't know you well enough to trust you. Let me find you. And that just stirred, I'm going to write about that. And I don't think it felt like I'm going to write a book. I was just going to write for myself, and out came a book.
Yeah.
So that's Finding God. That's what it's about.
Well, and it reminds me of Lewis when he wrote A Grief Observed, that it was different than when he wrote A Problem of Pain.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden it was no longer theoretical. It was now, I've got real life material that I am grappling with. And it changed it changed it. Did you find as you wrote the book that you were writing differently from the way you had come up
I think
into
so.
it before?
I think so. And I think that's the value of suffering. I don't see how the kind of maturity God wants to form in us, the kind of dependence he longs for us to feel in his presence, that cannot happen when life is going just wonderfully.
Mm-hmm.
And our thought is, do I really want to know God as well as he would like me to? And is there going to be a cost in that? And so as I wrote the book, I think there was a deep sense of something is different within me now. I really can't manage my life anymore. I've got to find, because I can't see to it. Prayers don't keep planes from crashing. I prayed for Bill that day. It's been a routine prayer, Lord, journeying mercies,
Yeah.
I prayed for Bill's safe flight, and then the plane crashed. And I do think, by the way, that's when I lost confidence in prayer.
Wow.
It made me think about what is prayer really all about, and prayer at that time felt like negotiation.
Yeah.
Felt like my way to maneuver God to cooperate with my plans.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know how to pray.
Yeah.
I don't even know who God is. And that led to the book. But you mentioned Lewis. Did you ever think about the book, the Problem of Pain? Is called The Problem of Pain, and Grief Observed is called A Grief Observed. Do you ever think of the distinction there? Lewis is writing as a bit of an academic in The Problem of Pain, and he's saying that in the introduction to the book, he says, I don't want to pretend to anybody that I'm above hurting and pain. I consider myself a coward, and the only thing I'm doing in this book is giving an intellectual answer to the problem of pain, the problem of pain. But in Grief Observed, he didn't write the Grief Observed. He didn't say, this is how to handle your grief.
Right.
He said, let me just tell you what I'm going through.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what it means for me to look for God in the middle of distress and pain. And I think I wrote Finding God in not a manual for how you can find God, but what's my journey in finding God in the middle of losing my only brother,
Yeah.
and then knowing I'm going to grow old without a brother.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that.
I think one of the things that resonated with me so many years ago was that there is no shortcut to working through it, and I think that was the idea of how to work through it to find God. That so many times I'm looking for a shortcut around it. How do I short circuit this so that I can get around it? What when you say to move through something, what's entailed with that?
Several things occur to me. It seems to me the first is that we have to be incredibly honest with ourselves about what our emotions are, and not just the grief, certainly that, but a recognition that in the middle of those kind of terrible events in our life, and everybody has something.
Yeah.
Mine includes a lot of things. One is my brother's death in a plane crash. But I think one of the things that we're not going to get anywhere until we recognize that we're really disappointed with God. We're really not very thrilled with him. And the idea of worshiping him doesn't seem to be an attractive thought at all, because what's he worthy of worship for? So you start with that. You start with, God, let me tell you exactly who I am. And I have a very strong conviction that God meets us where we are, not where we pretend to be. And to put a little different spin on it, he meets us where we are, not where we wish we were. I could wish that when I heard about Bill's death, that I said, Lord, you do all things well. Let us sing together, it is well with my soul. Let us kneel to the ground and praise God. I couldn't do any of that. I was ticked. I was frustrated. I was hurt. I was scared. I wasn't terribly impressed with God. And it's where the grace of God, he takes us as we are, not as we wish we were. But then I think the next, I don't want to use the word step, but the next part of the flow of finding the Lord in the middle of the distresses of life, when you really acknowledge what's going on within you, which is the first part of the flow that gets the flow moving, I think the next part of the flow is a recognition of what do I want most? What is the deepest desire in my soul? What am I more thirsty for than anything else? And I believe in the writing of that book, what I became aware of slowly, and maybe not fully, but I became aware that there really is a thirst, a desire within my soul for something more than a brother who didn't die. Now, do I want my brother not to die? Well, of course. I could tear up on that for the moment here. I don't want Bill to die. And to this day, I think about him a lot, and I miss him. I really do. But I have a thirst for something more than a living brother. I have a thirst for something more than a mother without Alzheimer's, and she died after a 7-year battle of Alzheimer's. I have a thirst for something more than being healthy. I have a thirst for something more than all the good things of life, and that almost stuns you. And that's what Lewis calls the inconsolable longing. I have a thirst to know that I'm profoundly loved at my worst. I have a thirst to know that no matter what happens in my life, I cannot be destroyed. I have a thirst to know that in any circumstance of life, I can do something that brings meaning and joy to my life, even when I'm miserable. And I think writing that book put me in touch with some of that. At a bit of a beginning level. I'm still a beginner. On my spiritual journey, I'd consider myself maybe in high school now, but my goodness, college and grad school is still a long way off. And I've been a Christian now for 60-some years, and I feel like I just finished junior high.
And that's because you continue to grapple with the questions. I've always seen you do that.
Yeah.
And that's what's been something that's been impacting on me is
How
to
does that
see.
impact you? What does that
Well, I
mean?
remember I talked to Grandpa at one point, your dad, and I said to him, I'm really doubting. And I'm just not sure, is there even a God? And I remember his comment to me was, well, it's about time. And I thought, what?
This is good.
Yeah. And but to wrestle with that and to come at the end of the wrestling or even in the middle of the wrestling, realizing there's nothing else.
Yeah.
And that's,
What
are the alternatives?
What's plan B?
Yeah.
I remember counseling one time with an airline pilot, and his life was a mess. And I said to him, your option is God. And he said, no, I want to know what plan B is. He literally said that.
Yeah.
And then he said, look, as a pilot, we always have a plan B.
Right.
If we can't land on this runway because some other plane is coming in because of lousy air control, we can go somewhere else. There's always, what's plan B here, Larry? And I said, find some other counselor. I don't have one.
Yeah.
And that's eliminate God, and I don't see much of anything. Let's get drunk. Let's do whatever feels good for the moment. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, because there's no God. But if there is a God, everything changes.
Yeah. I remember about 20 years ago, you saying, I was probably in my early 30s, you were in your early 50s, about the age I am now. And I remember you standing in front of a class and saying, you have 3 options. You can either, when you finally take the blinders off and start being real honest about what life is about, you have 3 choices. You can go crazy, you could kill yourself, or you can trust God. And I remember thinking, those are the options. Those are the bedfellows of trusting God. And yet now, I remember looking around the room thinking, is he really serious? I mean, doesn't he know who's in here? And there were Broncos players in that class. There were real successful businessmen.
Guys that had life together, things are great.
And I just sat there and go, is he crazy? Yet I looked at a couple other men that were in the class, deeply respected. They were about the same age as you, and they were nodding their head in agreement. And I remember thinking, I wonder what it is I'm not willing to take the blinders off over right now.
The first time I said that, I'm recalling it right now. I wouldn't have thought of it until you brought it up. I was teaching a Sunday school class in Boca Raton, Florida, where I was in private practice. And private practice did a number on me. Because I realized that I couldn't straighten out people's lives with all of my psychological training and good therapeutic technique and good theories of psychopathology. I couldn't take all of that and straighten out what was most deeply troubling and wrong with people. I couldn't do it. So I was wrestling with these questions and teaching a Sunday school class, and I had about 80, 90 people in the class. And there was a couple in there. There was a guy that was a very successful businessman, very, very wealthy. Good-looking, tall guy, low handicap golfer, beautiful wife, not just a trophy wife in some cheap sense of the term, a good woman, but just physically very beautiful. 3 gorgeous, perfect kids. I mean, his life was together. And I remember with him sitting in the audience saying that. You have 3 choices. If you get real about your existence and real about life, become a kind of a Christian existentialist facing the reality of existence, you got 3 choices: go crazy, kill yourself, or trust the Lord. I remember looking at him, and he was going, that's ridiculous. I got my life together. I'm trusting God, and He's blessing me. That's the Christian life. And I thought, no, it's not. No, it's not. Wait until your brother dies. Not that I wish that on anybody.
No.
I don't wish anybody to get cancer and to have their brother die or have their kid die like my parents lost their older brother, their older son. I don't wish that on anybody, but it's inevitable. Frederick Buechner, the great author, says that life gets difficult for everybody before it's over.
Absolutely.
And that's God's mercy.
It's set up to fail.
It's set up to fail. It's God's mercy. So Finding God just felt like a very important book in my journey that it's kind of put me in touch with the fact that I'm thirsty for more than life to go well.
Yeah.
Even though I still wanted to go well.
Yeah.
But they really are Lewis's thought of first things and second things.
Yeah.
You know, the second things are all the blessings of life. The first thing is knowing God and revealing Him to others until we get home. That's basically it, to put it in one simple phrase.
I think the staggering thought is that something actually survives. I think that's the terror, why people are unwilling to take the blinders off, why they're unwilling to move into, God, you really say you're on the other side of this.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that yet. And yet, I think what you've been saying with the death of your brother, the Alzheimer's with your mom,
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Something survives. What is that?
And you don't discover what survives until suffering requires you to find it.
Yeah.
And what survives, that's a very good question. I wish I had a great pat answer that I could just spin out real quickly here. What would I say actually survives in the middle of all that? One word occurs to me. Hope.
Yeah.
What survives is hope for what I most want.
Yeah.
And what I was built for, because I bear the image of God, I was built to know Him and make Him known. A quote straight from Paul.
Yeah.
And what survives is that desire in my soul is there in the worst of times, whether I'm aware of it or not.
Yeah.
And that's what it means to live by faith.
Yeah.
That I don't always necessarily feel the hope. I don't necessarily feel every day with Jesus is more hopeful than the day before. It doesn't feel that way, but it's true. And even now, as you guys know that I've been struggling with cancer for 20 years. There are moments, I wish they were lengthy seasons, there are moments, even as I'm going to be visiting my oncologist in about a week again, there are moments when I say, Lord, this is a privilege. Because maybe in the middle of this, I'm getting emotional here, maybe in the middle of this, I could reveal to anybody who's watching that there really is a God.
Yeah.
And that I have a thirst for more than being healthy.
Yeah.
The idea of death doesn't really bother me, except I don't want to leave behind my wife.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave behind my sons and daughters-in-law and 5 grandkids. I'd like to still be around to be with them and maybe encourage a little bit along the way as an old man. And if God takes that from me, well, that's His call. Because my central thirst is not that. My central thirst is to surrender to whatever God's wisdom actually is, believing that Romans 8:28 is not a cliche, but it might actually be true.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
If it's really true. You think the gospel's true, maybe? Sometimes I believe it.
Yeah.
Well, and even in your answer, I'm drawn to the fact that of even 1 Corinthians 13, that abide these 3 things. So,
Faith, hope, and love.
And that's what your answer. You started with hope, and you said that's what faith is, and that I can actually offer love in the middle of this.
And that's straight from Colossians 1:5, where Paul is saying to the Colossian Christians, I am so happy for your faith and your love which spring from your hope. So without the hope, this faith stuff is gone. Without hope, why bother loving anybody? But with hope, it's really going to be good.
Yeah.
All things shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. Julian of Norwich.
Yeah.
And if that's really true, and if I have that hope, then I come around to saying, I believe all this Christian stuff.
Yeah.
It's true. And therefore, what I want to do with my life is be there for somebody else. I wish I did that consistently, but it's in my soul, and it's in yours, and it's in all of our souls. And what book are we talking about?
Finding God.
And I think we just did.
I think maybe we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's a prize, a journey.
Yeah.
It isn't, got it knocked now. Just got my PhD in spiritual formation. Boy, I don't have that. But maybe I'm in high school.
Yeah.
And that's a good place to be.
Thank you, Larry.
Guys, you're bringing out a lot of good stuff to chat about. I appreciate it, both of you.
Thank you.
A lot.
Good.